I wanted to talk in the short time that we're together today about some misconceptions and some enemies of the business. I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there about our business. There's a lot of things people think, and we have to deal with those when we go out to talk to new people. Obviously, we're always trying to bring new people into our business, but there's some things that we fight. Now, I will say, it has gotten a lot better, just even in the short time that Jules and I have been building the business. People's perception of the Amway Corporation, or even of this kind of business, has drastically changed even in the last 10 or 12 years. I mean, it's shocking. Like, the amount of people that Jules and I sponsor now by telling we have an Amway business and we'd like to tell them about it is pretty stunning. Now, we didn't start out that way, right? And in fact, we've been in 3 companies since we've been in Amway. We didn't do anything, but they did. So it was, we started in Quickstar, and then it became Amway Global, and then it became Amway, and it was like slowly turning the heat up in the pot. At first it was like, no, we're affiliated with Amway, but it's Quickstar, okay? It's totally different. Now, I know it's owned by the same company, but it's totally different. And if they Googled it, then they found out it was Amway, and then it became Amway Global, which, to have a little bit of fun, was Amway Global only in the U.S., which is interesting. So, we've laughed a little bit over this time because I think, I was so afraid because my posture was not like it is now. And even having grown up in the household that I grew up in, it was still different to say my parents did Amway than to say I did Amway, right? I mean, that was, and when I told people my parents did Amway back in the day, I wasn't asking them to join me. So my posture was a little different. And I think one of the things that we talk about a lot in the misconceptions section is that, people thinking that this or others are not a legitimate business. Now, I hope, if you're new and you were here just even last night and you heard the speakers we had just last night, that you would fully know and understand that this is a legitimate business. You don't have people like Jim Jantz who've done this for 53 years as their exclusive career, making a good deal of money, traveling all over the world and all those things, and have it not be legitimate. You can't survive 5 decades. You can't be like my parents who, for 45 years or whatever, this was all they did all over the world. I mean, and the not a legitimate business question was one I never struggled with, because growing up in the household of my folks who started Network 21 and had built a big Amway business and were at what's called the Crown level the month that I was born, which was in August of '79, and have been at Crown or above since 37 years or whatever it's been now at the Crown level or above. So one of the questions I never had was whether this was legitimate or not. Because all these people you see at the front tables up here were all sort of my aunts and uncles, right? They were all people I knew and for decades, or whatever. So the whole this is legitimate or not legitimate thing was never one that I struggle with, but it is one that I think we have to overcome with some of the people that are out there today. And so you show them things like, look, if you live here in Southern California or anywhere near here, take them to the Center for Optimal Health, right? What other company has a facility to just show off how cool our vitamins are? Right? I mean, the fact that we didn't have to build that, and the fact that they built it, and you can anytime you want, whether you're a competitor of Nutrilite, if you're in another MLM, whatever you are, they say, great, come on in and just try to do that. Right? I mean, they sort of beg you to say, come in there and look at their manufacturing process and look at the way they do the things they do and understand how much care they take into making the products incredible. You walk into that Center for Optimal Health, you take their little behind the scenes tour, and they show you that after each run of vitamin C, even if they are going to do another run of vitamin C, they completely dismantle the entire machine, which is about the size of 3 or 4 of these tables put together. Right? They completely dismantle it, take apart every screw, every bolt, every nut. They clean it, hand clean it, right? With Q-tips and, all these different things. Then they put the whole thing back together. That is an 8-hour process to go ahead and run another run of vitamin C. But what they don't want is to have any particulates left from the last run that would change the amount of milligrams that are in each tablet. So they have to clean it even if they're running the same thing. The other places, you're lucky if they hose that bad boy down before they do the next run. There was an article in the New York Times, I think I might have talked about this last time I was here. You could look it up. New York Times had an article, the Attorney General of New York is bringing a lawsuit against Walgreens, Walmart, GNC, and Target. Okay? Walgreens, Walmart, GNC, and Target. We would agree that these are places where a lot of people get vitamins, right? So those are 4 of the top selling vitamin companies. Here's what they found. And you can look it up. The Attorney General found when they did their tests that 4 out of 5 contained 0 of what they claimed was on the label. This is our competition. And you know what they found it did have? powdered rice, asparagus, and houseplants. You are getting 1,000 milligrams of ficus, okay? It's not vitamin C, right? It's not other things. They are putting houseplants and cheap fillers like powdered rice and asparagus in those tablets, okay? So you're with a company that for, going on 80 years or whatever now, has been at the forefront, right? It's all plant-based, and it's not ficus, okay? It's the other plants that are good for you, right? And when you're taking vitamin C, that it has 1,000 milligrams of C. Guys, I don't even know if you were aware how cool that is that we actually have what's on our label in the product. I mean, we take for granted. You think, well, yeah, wouldn't everybody do that? No, apparently not. And when they conduct tests on our vitamins, they find that if it says 1,000 milligrams of C, it's exactly 1,000 every time, which is why they hand clean the machines with Q-tips after every run. So we don't have to do that, but we can represent a company that cares enough to do that, which is awesome. So we don't have to. I think we sometimes take for granted, like I said, that everybody does that. But when you say not a legitimate business, I go, we're more legitimate than any of the GNC guys, apparently. Right? So this is a pretty big deal. And they somehow managed to make it cost effective. Right? We got a multivitamin like Daily that costs about $6, $7 a month. Right? And the ones they sell at GNC that don't even have any vitamins in them. So you're getting a better, superior product that's actually less expensive and has opportunity built into the cost. That's pretty amazing. Right? So the good news is, you're with a legitimate company. Of course, they've done business in 100 countries. Every country they've gone to, they've never left. Right? You're with a company, as Will said, that has over 20,000 employees working to make our lives better and easier and make the path straighter for us and all the things that Amway does and websites. And when Amway launches an app or launches a new digital platform, I didn't even know they were working on one. But behind the scenes, they got a few hundred employees spending countless hours working on this new digital platform, and they're just going to roll it out, and we don't have to do anything. Right? I think we sometimes forget the power of that partnership we have with being with a multi-billion-dollar multinational corporation like we are. And then Network 21, right? And the partnership to not have to put on meetings like this, or not have to come up with new tools, or not have to fly in speakers or do any of those things. And you're with as Amway considers, one of the premier training organizations, and we get to be a part of it, and we don't have to, do the things to set it up, which is great. And we thank the Network 21 staff and for all they do in setting up these meetings. And, it's a lot of work. Jules and I see it firsthand. And so you're partnered with a company like us that has a few hundred employees around the world that we pay to make sure that you don't have to deal with any of those things, which is great. And a very professional company with CEO and CFO and COO and CSO and a lot of O's. So they're, with all those things that you don't have to pay or cover, and those guys work tirelessly to make our lives better too, which is great. And then you've got your upline team, of course, who's there to help you and help you make whatever amount of money you want to make in the business. And that was not something I had in the real estate world. It was not something I had in any other world. The closest I came to that was when I was a waiter, and you would shadow that guy, for a couple days so you learn what to do, which is always awkward, right? Have you ever eaten at a place and you see the guy shadowing, and he's kind of looks like the creepy dude that's standing back there, and I'm like, this is weird. Anyway, so this is like that, but not creepy, okay? So they're going to help you, right, succeed. And they're going to be a lot more caring in helping you succeed because they're going to make money if they help you succeed, right? And so we're paid based on the amount of income we make you, which means if your upline gives you advice or gives you coaching and tells you what to do, listen to them, right? They're paid based on your success. Right? They're not paid to get you to spend more money or get you to do more things. We're paid based on how much money we make you, which is a really unique setup in our industry. So, not legitimate. I think we can deal with that pretty easily just with a lot of the things we talked about there, but there's obviously more, but I want to get to a few more things today. So next thing, misconception is that people think you have to get involved on the ground floor, right, with a new company. We always see these people saying the hottest, newest thing, and, all of just like I used to get scared, these companies would come, and, Jules and I would go, oh no, this one's coming, and, my dad would laugh because 40 years of hearing these companies that were just like Amway, only better, ha ha ha, whatever. But, when you're naive and you haven't been around as long as he had, we got legitimately scared of a few companies that came along. We're like, oh God, maybe some of you are in this mode right now, whatever the new du jour in California floating around is. We felt like everybody was getting in that. Nobody was getting in our business. We were totally scared it was going to take over, everything. And my dad's like, oh, it's fine. And I'm like, well, easy for you to say, multimillionaire, okay? We're making like $9, right? So if our group goes away, right, that's -9, okay? So I felt like, he'd go, oh, don't worry about it. It's kind of like married people telling you, like, don't try to find someone. Don't worry. You'll get married eventually. I'm like, well, yeah, you got kids and a wife and whatever. It's easy for you to say, bucko, right? But I'm lonely every Friday night. So, much as I'd like to wait around for the right one to come along, right? It's great. Easy to say when you're in that position. Okay. So we felt like he was just lying to make us feel better and that our business would actually be taken down by Arbonne or what do you call it, Moda Funky Juice or any of those companies that were coming along that aren't even around anymore, right? All these things we were so scared of that were just gone. And our Amway business continued to grow and all the business continued to grow around the world. I remember going when we were Sapphires, and we had told Mitch Sala, we had told my dad, we told everybody we were going Emerald. Okay, we wanted to go Emerald because Mitch said we could come be supplemental speakers in Australia if we made Emerald, and so we were like dead set on making that happen. Gave my dad the goal, set it on stage, everything you can do to make sure this goal was going to happen. That was in September. So September, the third leg was at like 2,000 points or 2,500. It was recognized new ELC, and it was charging along, easily getting to Emerald. So we spent the next 5 months working exclusively on that leg. And in that 5 months, it went from 2,500 points to 500 points. Okay, so with all of my attention and all of my focus, I managed to subtract 2,000 points from the leg I was focused on. Okay, this is not good. All right, so not good to the point that Dad, who was Mr. Leave Room for Miracles, right, and Mr. like, any goal can be done as long as you put, that which a man can believe, blah, 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 all that stuff, okay? So all that seemed true, right? He sat me down in January and said, I just don't think it's your year. And I'm like, he said, I think next year would be better. I'm like, you don't give up on anyone. I'm your son. Now, he was right? The legit counsel would have been, this ain't your year, dude. You spent 5 months working on something that you managed to lose 2,000 points on, okay? So I went down $6,000 in volume, right, in a 5-month period. This is not good, okay? So he was being correct when he said, nicely, he sort of couched it as Dad would. He set the table for like an hour before he said, like, you ain't making it. And then he's like, but don't worry, blah, 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 blah. And all I heard was, you ain't making it. And I'm like, oh, great. My dad, who believes in everyone and just told me last week to leave room for miracles, is telling me your ship's sinking. You better bail out. I'm like, okay, awesome. So we decided we were going to make it happen, regardless of what our mean upline said. Okay. So we're like, we had a guy that I sponsored here, who was a friend of mine from college, had a bunch of family up in Kentucky. So we drove 6.5 hours up to Kentucky to do a plan for his family. And he had several people there, and his dad, still goes down in history as like the worst meeting I've ever done in my Amway career. And I've done some really, really horrific meetings. Okay. So this was the most condescending, awful, horrible, what? We were mad, yeah, and I don't even get mad. We're during the plan. He is telling me, he tells me at the end of the plan how Amway is like done, okay? He tells me he's a seasoned networker. You love this guy already, right? He's like, what you got to do is find a new company. I mean, he said what we know people do, but nobody actually says. He was like, you got to find a new company, be in it a couple years, and then when it starts to get to the tipping point, you jump out and you get something else. And that's how you reap all the benefits of the business over these years, whatever. And I'm like, and he's telling me as a seasoned networker, Amway's had its time. It's totally saturated. It's not going to work. And you guys will never make it in that. And you got to do something else. And now, mind you, this seasoned networker, okay, who knows everything there is about networking, lives in a trailer in Kentucky in a field. There is nothing wrong with living in a trailer in Kentucky in a field unless you're going to be condescending about being a seasoned networker. So I could have reached my hands out and touched both walls of his house while he's telling me how seasoned of a networker he is, okay? Jules was so mad, I thought she was going to come across the table. I was mad. I was phlegmatic mad, so I was holding my cool and, doing my thing. So we left there. We drove back to Atlanta, dropped our friend off in Atlanta, and then drove 6.5 hours down for the first time, then the same day, for the first time to Panama City, where we showed Brian, our guy, and we ended up getting to, so that was mid-January. We did the first meeting for him. End of March, we were at 9,700 PV in our third leg, and all created from that Panama City group. In the same day as the condescending trailer guy, we got the guy who built the fastest business we ever had in our organization on the same day. I mean, you couldn't plan that. God could not have planned that any better. I mean, most people would have wanted to curl into the fetal position after the 6 hours we spent driving to go meet this guy who had that long 2-hour talk with us. I mean, we should have gone home and gone to bed and said, we'll do Panama City. We didn't know Panama City was going to turn into anything. It was a 27-year-old guy who, quote, likes to work out, and, and hhis friend, who really didn't want anything to do with the business, but we thought, whatever, we're quote, going Emerald, so we drove down there. Easy to say now, like, well, of course, but it's like a 12-hour drive that day after a really disheartening meeting that we thought was going to be good. The Panama City one was kind of an afterthought. That was like, well, that's not going to be good, but this meeting with 15 people in Kentucky could turn into something. And that was a train wreck, and we got the best leg we ever had out of the afterthought, so to speak, right, or the fastest leg we ever had. So it's just funny to me how people will say, you got to get in on the new stuff, you got to whatever, the seasoned networkers out there will say that, but that leads to a trailer, and we stuck with Amway, and it did pretty good. Another misconception is the product is not important. Obviously, we know the product is important. You can't have a network without moving product and make any money. We've already talked about what they do with Nutrilite and Artistry and all the different product lines, super important. But on the other side of that coin, a lot of people think education's not important. Well, if I just learn about the product, or I just use the product and whatever I can get out there, or I've had success in other arenas of life, so therefore I can attribute it to this. What's funny is nobody really does that in other fields that often. Somehow with this, they think that they can just attribute whatever they learned elsewhere to this and they'll be fine. I mean, nobody goes to be a doctor and just says, well, I was a pretty good lawyer. So, if I just apply that here, I feel like I could you apply some things? The discipline to study and learn and those kind of things, of course. But there are things that you do have to learn here, and knowledge is important. That's why it's so great, and you should all get a round of applause for being here at this weekend and learning. Because you got a lot of other options of things you can do. Jules and I, when we were, first starting and all the way through every meeting we've ever had, we planned our life around the meetings, not the other way around, right? We literally would look at the calendar as far out as we could, and we said no to lots and lots of things through our time because everybody does that for their job. Right? We think because this is voluntary that you're somehow a jerk if you miss something because of work or because of something you have to do for your business. Nobody would blame you at all if this were a medical conference. If you can't go to your friend's wedding and you're like, oh, hey, listen, I got to be up at Hopkins for a medical conference that weekend. So sorry, whatever. They'd be like, oh, yeah, I get it. And it is the same here. But it's in the way you posture it. Most people don't even ask because they know the meeting would be easy to cancel. Right? Nobody knew you were coming. Right? It won't really affect you. You think, I'll be at the next one. And I've heard so many people say, I'll be at the next one that we never saw again. So don't make the mistake of thinking, that knowledge or those things like, oh yeah, I'm already motivated, or I don't need the knowledge, or I've already been an executive, I've run a company, I think I can do Amway. Well, yeah, but it doesn't mean you can do an effective startup. Right? Doesn't mean you can show an effective plan. And it doesn't mean you know what's important about all the meetings we do in between those things. So you definitely want to soak up, and knowledge is for sure important and not necessarily what you learned elsewhere. Another misconception is that it takes an outgoing sort of salesy type personality. Right? It's one of the first mistakes that new people make when I sit down with them is, I'm going to talk to so-and-so because of XYZ. And here's what I can tell you. XYZ is almost always the last reason I would want to talk to said person. Right now, the longer you're around, the more you realize there are a lot of other factors there. But they'll say, because he's really good at sales, or because he's this, or because he's that, or because he's broke and hasn't had a job in 20 years, or whatever reasons people think of in the beginning are often the complete wrong reasons. Now, they make sense. If you were outside of the business and you never knew, it actually would make sense to want to talk to people who are good at sales. But when you know what we know, you realize that actually can be somewhat detrimental because it's not duplicatable. Right? And people don't think they can be them, or people are feeling manipulated by them, or people are feeling tricked or, whatever by them. And when you have people that are just genuine good people, whether they're quote salesy or not, they're the ones who connect. My dad would not have been described in the early days and even later as a salesman. Now, he ended up being very good at this business. But boy, in the beginning, my mom told stories about his plan. It was like he had one of those, what they call eidetic memories, right? Where he could memorize everything. It's photographic memory, right? So he could memorize, and it was like 27 pages of like 8-point font describing the Amway story, and it was the way they sent it out. And so he memorized it and then proceeded off of the little movie screen in his brain to read the plan to all the people who were there. And my mom's job, as she said many times before, was to stand in the back with a cattle prod and threaten anybody who wanted to leave the room because it was so boring. Right? It was like back turned, drawing circles in 1959. Amway was started by Rich DeVos and Jay Van Andel, whatever. And people were like, trying to sneak off. And mom's like, back, sit down and you'll like it. Okay. It's going to be great. Just listen to the information, not the delivery. Okay. But nobody in the end was like, wow, I couldn't do what that guy did. Now, did they get good at the business? Of course. Right? Like anything. But boy, would those people who sponsored them they ended up missing out anyway, but boy, would they have missed out if they would have glossed over the engineer and the somewhat introverted teacher at that time who didn't really have any friends at the school. Right? So it's just funny that the things that people attribute to what makes people successful and what doesn't are often so wrong. Now, let's talk about some of the enemies of success in the business. So one of the biggest enemies, once we get over the misconceptions, is not enough frontline. Not enough teams that you're working with, right, to be successful. So my dad used to say it this way: you can't lead what you need. Right? And when you're spending your whole time in the business trying to get people to do stuff so you can be successful, they figure that out pretty quickly. Okay? They don't want to be used. They don't want to feel like they're the only thing you have. And you have to do it by showing them. Janos talked about that last night. And in the leaders meeting, you have to demonstrate it. You have to show it. You have to be the leader or be the example. John Maxwell put it this way. He said, average leaders direct their people. Good leaders direct and explain to their people. Excellent leaders direct, explain, and demonstrate to their people. And the greatest leaders direct, explain, demonstrate, and inspire their people. So it's so much more about being, and I've said this before, John Maxwell put it as the difference between tour guides and travel agents. And he said travel agents book travel to places that they've never been, and tour guides take people on adventures of places they're intimately familiar with, right? And so that's the idea, right? Is that we want to take people where we've gone, and we want to be the example in our group by sponsoring and putting new people in the business all the time. Sometimes, we'll get off an inspiring speech from somebody who talks about how you got to get more personals in the business, and you got to whatever. And the first instinct, even though we know this, the first instinct is to go to the group and say, okay, here's how you guys are going to sponsor some more people, right? And it's like instantly about them. And as soon as it becomes about management, and as soon as it becomes about telling the people in your group what they should be doing, right, then they turn around and do the same thing, and they turn around and do the same thing, and before you know it, the last guy is talking to nobody. Right? He turned around to tell his group what to do, and he's it, right? So everybody's focused on him. Ultimately, you have to make the decision to sponsor more personals. Look, we have a challenge, a contest going on right now, which we're going to go into a little bit more detail on later. We have a contest right now around personally sponsoring people. So there's some pretty cool prizes. There's all kinds of great stuff happening as a result of that. Now, we should want to do it anyway. Everybody could stand to be a little bit more profitable. I mean, obviously talk to your coach and see, but, I think a few new frontline wouldn't hurt anybody. Right? Get more profitable, get some new teams started, get some new fresh blood. There's a lot that comes from great stories, and most of all, it will encourage the people in your group to do it because you've done it. So it's not a theory, it's not telling them that they should do it, but actually going out and putting some new people in the team is super, super important. So not enough frontline. and not enough width in order to create profitability, because that's where profitability comes from. The other enemy is not enough depth. I love how my dad used to, do those things all the time, right? He'd talk about how important width was, and you're like, yeah, width. All right, yeah, that's great. Get more width. And then he's like, well, careful, you need more depth. And I'm like, because like everything in this business, it's about balance, right? Depth brings stability, width brings profitability. So we do need to find more depth. And what do I mean by depth? I don't just mean, going deeper on the computer or sponsoring people right down in depth or putting, getting their guy in and then their guy in and their guy in. Yeah, that's great. But there's a lot more to it than just going numbers deeper on a computer. There's relationships we build, right? One of the tools we have this weekend through the core webinar series, I do a whole 45-minute explanation on how to build those relationships in depth in a team. So I'm not going to do that today because I only have a few minutes left. But you do need to build some relationship. It's not just about going a number, as I said, deeper on the computer, but it's about getting people from their list, understanding the power of that. Not just taking people from your list, but getting people from their list and helping them get people from their list and helping, because that brings personal accountability to those people when they have their folks in the business. And that makes them stay in longer, and it makes them pay attention more, and it does a lot of things that you may not even see right now. Right? But the minute they have their friend in, it changes. So if you're new, talk to your coach about how you should help go deeper. How should you help foster key relationships in those teams? So even when a team is brand new, right, we have key relationships we've had in legs for, going on 13 years or so now, that we started 13 years ago, that have now become platinums and emeralds and, above in our business over that time, but started out as just the first 5 people we had coming to conferences. So the key relationships have morphed over that time into a lot of other things. But very, very important to get enough depth and have the stability there, because if you understand the plan, if you go wider, you're going to make a lot of money. But all of the people in your team are not making very much money, which means it's not very stable, right? They're all at 3% and you're at 12%. It's not totally great, right? If you have 40, 50 teams and everybody's only at 3%, so they're making a little bit and you're making a lot more. Also not great if you have one leg and you're at 18%, because all you get then is 18% back on the products you buy, which also doesn't make you much money, but it's much more stable. So what you want is a nice balance between the two, and your coach can help you with exactly what that structure should look like for you. Another enemy of the business is people talk too much. I think Roger Johnson wrote on one of those notes from the past sort of things that said, you've seldom listened your way out of a good prospect, right? Prospecting is about listening, not talking, right? Because you seldom listen your way out of a good prospect. It's true. I watch people do it all the time. They're like, doing great. Oh, then they, or worse, I've just shown a plan. The guy's just about to pick up the pen to sign the form, and new guy who's trying to help me is like, well, whatever. And the guy puts the pen down. I'm like, no, because then he was right there, like just about to sign. I'm like, get up, walk away from the desk. It's my fault. I should have said when I'm done, shut up, right? But they're like, what's great about Dave is he'll help you, blah, blah. And they say something in there that I watch the guy's face go, oh, because he was trying to help. Right? And he was trying to be helpful and tell him how great it is that Dave will be there anytime. And then it makes it sound like I'm going to be at this guy's house all the time. And the guy's like, I'm going to think about it, folds the paper. And I'm like, I've lost more good people with well-meaning conversations than I would care to talk about. And you, meaning people, I myself too, have lost more good prospects by talking too much about it and not realizing how much power there is in just short lines, getting a number, connecting about other things, and then walking away and calling them later. They say too much on the phone. They talk too much at the startup. They keep them there for 2.5 hours. Then the person doesn't want to have any more meetings with you. Because no matter how well that went, when they walk away from that meeting, they go, I could not do that every week. Right? I have lost really, really good people because I had what I thought were excellent, awesome, life-changing conversations with them. Right? And I felt like, man, we connected, we bonded, we whatever, and they got home at 9:30 and we met at 7, and they went, we can't do that. They don't not like us. They don't not like the business. They just can't do that. They can't give that amount of time to this business. Now, what you want to say is, well, it won't take that time that long every time, and it's not, it's not going to be like that. It's not. But all they know is what they experienced. So no matter what you say, the actions were different, and you lose really, really good people, especially the good ones who are busy. You'll look at that and go, I can't do that. And so be careful, right? Because even if you feel like it's going well, and it probably is, and they probably loved it, but they just won't continue on because they can't, and we got to be careful of that with our opens. We got to be careful of that, especially at the startup. We got to be careful of that at the plan. Some short, small talk, get into what you're there to talk about, get the app, and move on. So that the whole time, right, should take about an hour. I mean, you don't have to be militant about it, but it should take no more than an hour for you to sit down, have a little bit of a chat with them, then say, hey, let me jump into what we're going to talk about today. Learn your lines. It doesn't have to be, I mean, some people make that transition part so awkward. Right? It doesn't have to be that awkward. I mean, find a pause in the conversation and say, you know what, look, out of respect for your time, let me jump into what we're going to talk about today, and then if you got any questions or anything afterwards, I'm happy to answer them. That's the same line I've said for 12 years with every plan. Let me just jump into what we're going to talk about today. I'll start by giving you a short background on me. That's it. Every time I go to do the plan, and I've watched some of my, guys trying to figure out how to jump in and turn the conversation to business, and they just make it so awkward. They're moving stuff around on the table and they're trying to figure out how to jump into the conversation. It's not that hard. Just learn a line. Whatever line makes you feel comfortable, learn it and do it after you've had a little bit of a chance to talk. Obviously, don't clinically just, jump right in the second they sit down, but don't talk for 30 or 40 minutes before and then start showing the plan. Okay, important that you get to it and then you be the one to guide it. Because again, I'm telling you, even if you're having a great conversation, they're asking a million questions, whatever, if they get up from that table and it's been an hour and a half or more, and they think everybody they show it to is going to have to take that long, you will lose good people because they just don't want to spend that kind of time. So it's important for the future and for duplication and for all those things that they see it right. Now, obviously, I know extenuating circumstances happen and things happen and whatever. That's okay. When those kind of things happen, it's okay. But you want to try with everything you can to keep those meetings, the plan to about an hour, the startup to hour and 15, hour and a half tops, okay? And then the home meeting, same thing. It should all move relatively quickly to get people to feel like it's not that long. One of the other enemies of the business is pride. Pride or ego that for a couple reasons. Either keeps us from doing it, right? Or keeps us from talking to people we believe could be good at the business. Because we're afraid of what they might think, and we're afraid of what they would think of us. I mean, I've had lots of guys in my group, some of which who have no pride or ego issues. They know they're just trying to do something to better their family, so they'll talk to anybody. And I've had other guys who wait years to talk to their best people because they're so afraid of what those people might think. Now, if you're asking me, I mean, it's easy to say now, so far removed from it, and without a career to protect, right? Because my career is in the thing that they're afraid of talking about. So without a career to protect, I don't mind, but I can put myself in their shoes and I can get why my attorney friend or my doctor friend or my engineer friend or whatever doesn't want to run to all of his people and talk to them about Amway. But, like I said, people are not as mean and scary as we think. I mean, every once in a while you get the single wide Kentucky trailer guy, right? But for the most part, people are pretty nice. Right? And I keep telling them, like, these are successful people. They haven't made a habit of excoriating their friends or ruining relationships or whatever, right? I mean, you have to remember sometimes that we paint people out with this picture like they're going to be these ogres and just go after us for doing something like this. But, if they are, then aren't you glad you found that out? Right? I mean, for me, it was like, I kind of want to know who those people are in my life because I'm not going to call them an idiot if they don't do it. And I hope they don't call me an idiot for doing it. I hope they would treat me with as much respect as I treated them with. I showed them an opportunity. If they don't want to do it, great. If they do make fun of you for it, and that has happened. We've had a couple guys in our group who've gotten made fun of or had partners try to, do stuff to get them to stop building the business or whatever and all that. But every single one of them to a letter said, I'm kind of glad I found that out. Because it would have come out somewhere else. That's a character issue on their part, right? It's a flaw. So how great that it came out with something like this, as silly as showing them the plan, then it could have come out in a much scarier situation when you were relying on them. Right? So it's actually kind of a good thing to find out and to filter through the relationships in your mind. Because if we're trying to have positivity and people around us that think like us and whatever, why not go through and let this be a filter, not for who your friends are. We have all of our friends didn't do it. Right? It's not about that. It's about how they react to it. Right? And what they say. And I will tell you, 99% of the time, they'll react fine. They may not do it, but they're going to be fine. And your relationship continues. You know why? Because the relationship continuing is dependent on you, not on them. If you're not weird when you talk to them next time, it's fine. If you are weird and avoid them, then it becomes weird. In all of our experience, we've never lost friendships by showing people the plan. The only people we've seen lose friendships is the ones who made it weird on their part. Well, they didn't mention it. Well, I don't mention it. And then it's like never talked about again. It's this big unspoken thing between them. Once they say no, move on, invite them over to watch a football game and act like it didn't happen. And what will happen 5 or 10 years later, potentially, is they'll ask you how that thing's going. And then you can, run them over with your Ferrari. Okay? So, and that will show them they should have joined you back in the day. Right? And you'll have the last laugh if you stay in long enough. Right? But don't let pride get in the way of talking to some really good people. Because the people I was unafraid to talk to got me an ELC business that went to negative 600. The people I was afraid to talk to got us to Founders Diamond in a few years. So it was a big, big difference maker for us when we started talking to the right people who had the right potential. So the peer and above thing, all those things that we say all the time that sometimes just gloss over, don't forget that. And don't forget how important it is to talk to the right people because I believe your future depends on it. So don't let the misconceptions take you out and don't let the enemies take you out. Focus on the right things and focus on the right people, and you can have any size business you want. So enjoy the rest of the weekend, guys. Thanks for letting me share for a few minutes. Appreciate it.